Ever get that like, oh, pit in your stomach feeling when you're watching a movie and someone's lost in the wilderness?
Oh, yeah.
Like 127 hours, right? When he's stuck.
Totally get that.
It's primal, right? And it kind of got me thinking, what would I do? So today, we're going deep on wilderness survival signaling.
Love it. That's a good instinct to have because that fear is primal, but knowledge is power, as they say.
Right.
We've got survival guides, we've got gear reviews, we've even got a men's style blog that's weighing in on this. Our goal is to equip you with the skills to, signal for help no matter where you are.
A men's style blog, huh? Okay, I'm officially intrigued. But first, why is signaling so important? I mean, beyond just yelling help, right? If you're lost.
Because yelling, it might not be enough, especially when time is super important. Like the National Park Service missing persons list, it's a real reminder that people get lost and every hour matters.
So we're talking life or death here.
Absolutely. Dehydration alone can become critical in just 3 days. And then you add in weather, maybe injuries, even wildlife. It gets dangerous fast.
Okay, that's pretty sobering. So what's the very first thing we need to understand about signaling?
It's contrast. It's all about contrast. Nature is all about blending in, camouflage, and you need to be the opposite. You got to stand out, be an anomaly.
So if I'm in a snowy forest, don't wear white.
Exactly. Our sources actually use a scenario just like that. Bright jacket against a white backdrop, it just, bam, disrupts those visual patterns rescuers are trained to look for.
That's funny you mention that because I used to wear camo. I thought it made me some kind of wilderness expert.
Yeah.
And then I read how likely it is that rescuers overlook people in camo because you just blend right in.
It's a common misconception. And that's why clothing choice is actually crucial when it comes to signaling. It's, more than just being seen. It's sending a message, on purpose.
So it's the difference between accidentally bumping into someone versus, waving your arms and being like, hey, over here.
Yeah. Perfect analogy. Imagine, right, you're the rescuer, you're scanning this huge forest. That flash of orange, like a jacket laid out, it just says hey, I need help.
Not just, I like hiking in bright colors. Got it. But beyond just color, is there a science behind why certain colors work better?
Absolutely. Like hunter orange, right? Super visible because of how our eyes perceive color. It's not just tradition, it's science-backed survival.
So pack a bright item
Yeah.
specifically for signaling. Even if it clashes, it could save your life.
Now, before we go into specific gear, we got to talk about cell phones, right?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
It's that's the first thing you reach for in an emergency, your phone. But
the wilderness can be pretty rough on tech. Batteries die, screens get cracked, signals drop, and just exposure to the elements can mess up, all those delicate circuits.
so betting your life on a cell phone alone, that's risky. It's a tool, not a guarantee.
Exactly. Which brings us to the other essential signaling tools that can, really come in handy when your phone is basically a fancy paperweight.
Right. Hit me with your top picks. What should be in our signaling toolkit?
Let's start with something that's often overlooked, the whistle. Simple whistle, right? Surprisingly, plastic often beats metal in survival situations.
Really? Why is that? I would have thought metal was way more durable.
It is, you're right, for durability, but in, freezing conditions, metal can stick to your lips.
Oh, yeah.
Not good when you're going to signal over and over again. Plastic, it's less conductive, no frostbite surprise.
Okay, duly noted. Plastic whistle it is. Now, something a bit more flashy, what about those signal mirrors? Do those actually work?
Oh, they absolutely do. In World War II, a downed pilot used one to signal a plane that was over 105 miles away.
Wait, 105 miles? Are you serious? How's that even possible?
It's all about how you angle the mirror, right? To reflect sunlight towards your target. A well-aimed flash, it can be seen for miles, especially against, the sky. That pilot story is wow, human ingenuity, the power of a simple tool.
That's a story I won't forget. You realize, even the most basic stuff can be so powerful when used right. Now, what about glow sticks, the chem lights?
Yeah.
I always thought those were more for, fun than actual survival.
Well, they're fun, but they last 12 hours, which makes them super reliable at night. No batteries, no fuel, just steady light.
So when the fire's dying down and it's pitch black.
You got to back up. Speaking of, can't forget flares, those, pyrotechnic signals, right?
Okay, flares. Now we're talking. Definitely a step up in urgency, but also a little intimidating. What do we need to know about using those safely and effectively?
Well, flares are meant to burn intensely, right? Bright, attract attention from miles away. Handheld ones, you're good for a few miles. Aerial flares, 25 miles or more, incredibly effective, but gotta use them responsibly.
Yeah, I can imagine. You don't want to accidentally start a forest fire with those things.
Exactly. Safety's paramount. Make sure someone's within visual range, right? And you're not putting yourself or the environment at risk.
Okay, last but not least, the personal locator beacon, PLB. This feels like the ultimate get me out of here button.
PLBs are a game changer, yeah. They use satellites to transmit your location, right, to a global search and rescue network. 2019 alone, they helped save over 400 lives.
So we're talking direct line to a rescue team anywhere in the world.
Essentially, yeah. But, they're not foolproof. Dense foliage, canyons can disrupt the signal, and they got to be registered, maintained properly. But in terms of, reliability and accuracy, there's nothing like it.
Okay, so we've got our signaling toolkit, the whistle, signal mirror, chem lights, flares, and the PLB. What if you're lost without any of that gear?
That's where resourcefulness comes in. Remember that story about that group stranded on a Bahamian island?
Wait, remind me about that one.
They used debris to make a giant cross visible from the air. Rescued after 33 days.
33 days. That's amazing. So even when you have nothing, you can still signal. It's about thinking creatively, right?
Yeah.
Using your surroundings.
Exactly. And speaking of creative, let's talk about one of the oldest signaling methods, fire.
Ooh, fire. I love a good bonfire, but I'm guessing a signal fire is a different beast altogether.
You're right. Bonfires, warmth and ambiance, right? Signal fire, it's about visibility, lots of smoke.
So bigger is better, more smoke, more attention.
To a point, yeah. But you gotta think about safety control, right? You don't want to start a wildfire. You want a fire that's big enough to make a noticeable plume, but not, out of control.
Makes sense. So what kind of fuel should we use for that thick, attention-grabbing smoke?
Dry wood, it burns hot and fast, but not much smoke. Green branches, leaves, even damp moss, these will give you that thick white smoke that's really visible against a blue sky. And if you need black smoke, for contrast against a lighter background, add oily rags or rubber to the fire. Adapt your technique to the environment.
So basically customizing the smoke signal to match the surroundings. That's pretty neat. But, before anyone gets carried away with their inner pyromaniac, safety first, right? Don't accidentally burn down the whole forest.
Absolutely. Responsible fire building is essential. And also remember, signaling, it's not one size fits all. The best method, it depends on the situation, time of day, land, or sea.
Right. Context is key. So what are some of the key differences to keep in mind?
Daytime. Visual signals like mirrors, smoke, bright colors, those are your go-to. Nighttime, fires, strobes, planned light signals, those work better.
And land versus sea.
Land, you got more visual options. Sea, flares, dye markers, specific maritime signals, those are essential. And there's a universally recognized distress code everyone should know, the rule of threes.
Okay, the rule of threes, what is that exactly?
It's a simple but powerful pattern. 3 blasts of a whistle, 3 flashes of a light, 3 fires spaced apart. They all mean I need help.
That's a good one to remember. But knowing it is just the start, right? You got to practice these things.
Practice is key. It builds that muscle memory so you can react fast under stress. And it helps you understand how those signals actually work in different environments.
Don't just file this info away, folks. Get out there, try some of these techniques, maybe even plan a mock rescue with some friends, family.
That's a great idea. Turn it into a learning experience. And speaking of learning, we'll dive deeper into actually applying these signaling skills in our next segment.
Welcome back to our deep dive into wilderness survival signaling. We've covered the basics, the why, and the what. Now let's talk about the HOW. It's great to know all these techniques, but how do we actually put them into practice?
That's a really important point, because a signal is only as good as its ability to be seen or heard, right, by a rescuer. So we got to talk about placement and strategy.
Okay, so let's say I'm lost and I need to send out a signal. My first instinct is to just do it right where I am, But that's probably not the smartest move, is it?
Not always. Location is key. Let's start with visual signals, like your mirror or brightly colored cloth. You want to aim for high, open areas with a clear view of the sky.
So hilltops, meadows, even a rocky outcrop, something like that. Places where it'd have a better chance of being spotted from the air.
Exactly. Think like a rescuer. They're scanning a huge area, maybe from a plane or helicopter. You got to make yourself as visible as possible.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about something like a smoke signal? Wouldn't wind direction be a factor there?
Absolutely. You want the smoke to drift towards areas where people are more likely to be, like trails, roads, settlements. Don't let it just vanish into the wilderness.
So if I'm near a trail, position my fire so the smoke blows in that direction. Seems pretty straightforward, but now I'm curious, is there a specific technique to building a signal fire? I feel like it's got to be different from just a regular campfire, the ones you build for warmth.
You're right. The goals are totally different. Campfire, it's all about warmth, sustained burn. Signal fire, it's got to be about visibility, producing that big plume of smoke.
So size matters. Should I be going for, like, a bonfire level blaze?
Bigger isn't always better when it comes to signal fires. You got to balance visibility with control, right? A fire that's too big can become a safety hazard, could even spread unintentionally. Key is, build a fire that's big enough for that noticeable column of smoke, but not, like, out of control.
Okay, safety first. So it's not just about piling on the wood. What kind of fuel should we be using for that, thick, attention-grabbing smoke?
Dry wood's great for a campfire, but it burns too quickly and cleanly for a signal fire. You want stuff that will smolder, and produce a lot of smoke. Green branches, leaves, even damp moss, those are your best bets for thick, white smoke.
And I remember you mentioned earlier, we can even customize the color of the smoke depending on the environment.
Exactly. If you need black smoke to, like, really stand out against a lighter background, you can add things like oily rags or rubber to the fire. It's about adapting, right? Adapting to the specific conditions.
So it's like building a smoke signal with a purpose. That's pretty cool. I think it's important, though, to remind folks listening, fire safety is paramount. Don't accidentally burn down the forest trying to get rescued.
Absolutely. Always be mindful, follow those fire safety guidelines. Now let's shift gears a little bit. What about sound? Auditory signals. How do we use sound to our advantage?
Right. We talked about whistles earlier, but what about just shouting for help? Does that actually work?
It can, but you got to be smart about it. Sound travels differently in different environments. Dense forest, the trees absorb sound, harder to hear from far away.
So if I'm, like, surrounded by trees, shouting might not be super effective.
Right. But if you can get to a clearing or an elevated spot, even standing on a fallen log, it can make a difference.
So it's about getting above the obstacles, kind of like with visual signals.
Exactly. And when you shout, don't just yell continuously. You'll wear yourself out fast. Short, sharp bursts are way better. Remember that rule of threes applies to sound too.
Oh, right. 3 blasts of the whistle, 3 shouts. It's a pattern, stands out from the random noise.
Exactly. Clear, deliberate way to say, hey, I'm in distress. Now, beyond the techniques themselves, there's another crucial aspect of signaling we got to address: persistence.
Persistence? You mean like not giving up hope?
That's a big part of it, but it's also recognizing that signaling, it's not a one-time thing. You got to be consistent, especially if you're in a remote area.
Yeah, it's easy to get discouraged if you don't, see a response right away. Yeah. But giving up, that could be a fatal mistake.
Think of it this way. Every time you send a signal, you're upping your chances of being found. Even if it feels like nobody's listening, someone somewhere might pick up on it.
So it's about staying active, staying visible, and never losing hope.
Exactly. And to help maintain your morale and energy, it's helpful to have a routine.
A routine for signaling. What would that look like?
Instead of signaling randomly throughout the day, set specific times for sending those signals. Stick to that schedule as much as you can.
So like every hour on the hour I spend, say 15 minutes sending signals, using a few different methods.
That's a great approach. And in between those signaling periods, focus on taking care of yourself. Stay warm, find water, conserve energy, balance the need to be seen with the need to survive. Right?
But the two-pronged approach. Yeah. Active signaling, passive survival strategies.
Exactly. And remember, even when you're not actively signaling, you can still increase your chances of being seen.
How do you mean?
If you've got a bright tarp or a space blanket, spread it out in a clearing. Use rocks or branches to spell out SOS or HELP on the ground. Think about ways to create visual markers that really pop against the environment.
So even while I'm resting or conserving energy, I'm still sending out that message.
Precisely. And if you're with a group, you can coordinate your efforts to make those signals even stronger.
I like that idea. How would you, coordinate signaling as a group?
Let's say you've got 3 people. Each person takes on a different signaling method. One builds a fire, another uses a mirror, and the third shouts at regular intervals. Creates a multi-sensory signal that's more likely to be noticed.
So we're combining our efforts, making a stronger, more diverse signal.
Exactly. And if you have a whistle, You can use it to signal to each other,
Mm.
right? Coordinating your movements, timing, turns chaos into a well-coordinated effort.
Teamwork makes all the difference, even in a survival situation. Now let's talk about the moment we've all been waiting for. What happens when you actually make contact with rescuers? Right, this is it, the moment of truth. I've managed to signal a plane or a helicopter. They're circling overhead. What's the best way to really let them know I need help?
First thing, stay calm.
Oh, yeah, easier said than done.
I know, right? It's
Uh-huh.
natural to want to panic, wave your arms like crazy, but that can actually make it harder for the pilot to see you.
So controlled movements are key.
Exactly. Best signal. Raise both arms slowly above your head, make a Y shape with your body. It's a universal distress signal. Really stands out.
Okay. Y for yes, please rescue me. Got it. And if I have a signal mirror, now's the time to use it, right?
Absolutely. Aim it right at the aircraft, make a bunch of bright flashes. Even if the pilot doesn't see you directly, they might see the glint of the mirror, and that'll, draw their attention.
Makes sense. What if it's nighttime, though, and a rescue team's coming on foot? What's the best way to signal them?
If you have a flashlight or a headlamp, use it to signal. 3 flashes, pause, 3 flashes. That rule of threes again.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
But what if I don't have a light source?
You can build a small signal fire, or if you have chem lights, lay those out on the ground in a triangle. Even in the dark, contrast and visibility are still important.
Right, still got to stand out from the environment. So even after I've made contact with rescuers, I should keep signaling until they actually get to me.
Absolutely. Don't assume they've got a clear view or know exactly where you are. Keep signaling until they're right there with you.
Stay visible, stay safe, never give up hope. Now, before we wrap up, I want to talk about, the mental side of survival. It's not just about the physical skills.
Right. You're so right. The mental and emotional challenges of being lost, they can be just as tough as the physical ones.
So we've got the rule of threes down, our signal mirrors ready to go. But what about when panic sets in? How do you stay calm, focused when you're lost and alone?
Well, it starts with, acknowledging that fear, but not letting it take over. Fear is natural, keeps us alert. Panic, though, that's what leads to bad decisions.
Yeah, that's easier said than done.
Right.
Lost in the wilderness, it's getting dark, you don't know when or if help is coming.
Yeah.
How do you actually stop yourself from, spiraling?
One of the best things is to just focus on your breath. Slow, deep breaths. Count each inhale and exhale. Sounds simple, but it helps slow your heart rate, calms your nerves.
It's like hitting the reset button, kind of a mini meditation in the middle of a crisis.
Exactly. And another thing that helps is breaking things down into smaller tasks, manageable. Don't get overwhelmed by being lost. Focus on what's right in front of you. Shelter, water, signaling for help.
Like a mental checklist, right?
Mhm.
What I can control instead of feeling helpless about what I can't.
Exactly. And never underestimate positive self-talk. Remind yourself what you're good at, your skills, your will to survive. Easy to get negative, but focusing on the positive, that can change everything.
It's all about mind over matter, right? If you believe you can survive, you'll find a way.
And even if you're alone, remember, you're not helpless. You've got the knowledge, the skills to signal for help, and there are people out there, pros, ready to respond.
That's a really good point, to know there's a whole network out there ready to go.
Exactly. Stay positive, stay persistent, and trust in your ability to survive.
That's such great advice. And for our listeners who, are inspired to really up their wilderness preparedness game, what are some other resources they could check out?
There are so many amazing organizations that offer wilderness survival courses. Everything from basic signaling to advanced navigation, rescue techniques, the whole works.
I bet some of our sources mentioned specific groups or programs, right?
Oh, yeah. Like the Art of Manliness article, they mentioned the U.S. Army Survival Manual. It's online, super comprehensive, especially the signaling techniques.
And for those of us who, learn best by doing.
So many of our sources talked about practicing in real-life settings. Find a park, a wooded area, try those signaling methods out, see how they work in different conditions. Could even be a fun activity with friends or family.
Yeah, like a dress rehearsal for the unexpected.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned before, planning a mock rescue scenario, that's a great way to test those skills in a safe environment.
For sure. The more you practice, the more confident you'll be if you ever find yourself in a real survival situation.
Knowledge is power, practice makes perfect, and never underestimate the human will to survive. That's a great takeaway from this deep dive.
I agree. And before we go, one last thought-provoking question for our listeners. If you could only pick one signaling tool to take with you into the wilderness, what would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So many good choices. I think for me, it'd have to be the signal mirror. It's small, it's light, and it's super versatile. And just, the idea of being able to reflect sunlight towards a plane or a search party, that's pretty empowering.
It's a great choice. The best tool is the one you know how to use well.
Well said. Listeners, we want to hear from you. Head over to our social media, let us know what you would pick as your ultimate survival signaling tool, and tell us why.
And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into wilderness survival signaling.
Stay curious, stay prepared, and we'll catch you on our next adventure.